Well, thank you so much for having me. Like Tom said, I'm Ilse Wambacq. I'm on the faculty in Communication Sciences and Disorders at Montclair State University, where we treat patients with speech and hearing disorders. So my area of expertise is mostly, I'm not an audiologist, but my area of expertise is in cognition and hearing science. And so that's what we started talking about, Tom and I, as to what are we going to really delve into. And you see that the title of the talk is quite a mouthful. Sorry about that. I can't say the things that I'm interested in a very, very short sentence. But so basically, we are talking about speech perception broadly defined. Talking about listening to sounds, listening to people talking in difficult listening environments. We've all experienced that and how really taxing it can be for us. So, Baby and Baby Driver is not going to necessarily have problems with that, but it is a pretty good example of somebody who is, unbeknownst to most of us, actually who finds himself in a very complex situation, in a difficult situation, while he appears to be outwardly very calm, composed, and doesn't seem to be faced by anything. But inside, there's a lot going on, and that's what I want to talk to you about. So for those of you who have seen the movie, you already know it. Those who haven't seen the movie, this is Baby, and he actually has suffered a childhood trauma in a car accident and has tinnitus since then. And I don't know if you have experienced tinnitus yourself, but it is basically a phantom sound that is there all the time, oftentimes. It can come and it can go. It depends, like if you're very stressed, it might get worse. But basically, it's a sound that's really not there. There is no external sound, and yet you hear things. What do we hear when we have tinnitus? It really depends. It varies. They come in all kinds of sounds. Some people will say there are crickets in their heads. Some will say there's constantly a fan blowing. But the overarching issue with tinnitus is that it could get very annoying. What it does is a lot of people have expressed that they have problems with speech perception. So in other words, they will not understand other people very well, and they blame their tinnitus. Now, there's a lot of controversy in the literature on whether it's really affecting our speech perception. But one overarching issue that really stands out is that it interferes with our attention and our concentration. So when you have tinnitus, it is drawing your attention away from whatever is going on that you should be focusing on. And therefore, you might appear to have perception problems. There's also some idea that the tinnitus sound itself is masking the external sound that's going on around you, and therefore you may have a harder time hearing it. There is also a thought that if your tinnitus is of the same frequency as the sounds that make up our language, that also is interfering and masking out some of the real sounds that we need to be perceiving when we try to understand speech. Again, that is not necessarily 100% foolproof in terms of the findings in the literature, but those are thoughts that are out there. What it does cause a lot, and it really depends on the individual, it causes a lot of anxiety and stress. So it has the potential of having a real psychological repercussion for the individuals who are suffering from it. And so if you are an employer and you have somebody who has tinnitus and who seems to be quite normal to you, and yet that person cannot really focus or hear what you're saying, they're not faking it. It's really an issue, but it tends to be more of a cognitive issue, anything that has to do with the brain. So, oftentimes, tinnitus and hearing loss go hand in hand. So it does occur more when you really have a problem with your hearing, but it doesn't have to be. In fact, a lot of young folks who really go to concerts oftentimes come home with tinnitus, and the tinnitus will last for a few days because they were exposed to very loud noises, and it really does lead, over time, it can lead to hearing loss. So for those folks of you who love to go to loud concerts, be very cognizant of that. If you come home and you have a ringing sound in your ears, that means that you really were exposed to sounds that were way too loud for you, and your ears are trying to tell you something. Be careful. Do not do that again. All right, so in the movie you will see that Baby is almost constantly having his earbuds in his ears, and he is listening to music. Why does he do that? That's a question that's actually a very important one, and I'm going to explain it to you with this little candle. When you are in a dark room, what do you see now? A candle, right? It's the first thing that pops up. You don't see anything else because there's one candle that's lighting up the room. What do you see now? What's that? Everything else. There are also candles. In fact, there are way more candles than in that one picture of the candle in the room when it's dark. But everything else, there are candles on the table. There are also some candles reflected in the mirror, but they don't stand out anymore. When you have tinnitus and there's nothing else going on around you, that's all you hear. It's that nagging sound that's continuously there. If there are other sounds around you, the nagging sound is not going to be as noticeable. And that's what Baby is doing. By listening to the music, by putting on music, he's trying to drown out the tinnitus that's going on. However, like what I said earlier, be aware. He's not doing a very good job protecting himself because he's blasting the music very loudly. And in fact, he might be causing more tinnitus by doing that, especially with the earbuds and the AirPods that we're using these days. It's really not so good for your hearing. All right. So some of the other characters in the movie are not so understanding of our little friend, Baby. They are quite unimpressed by the fact that he's always listening to the music. And they say, what's up with him? How can we even trust him to do a good job when all he does is being busy listening to the music? That is stigma at its finest, I must say, because really, people are having an opinion about Baby by really looking very superficially at what he's doing, right? They actually, and you will hear them say that he is stupid. There's nothing there. All he does is really being in his own world. He is not communicating. He doesn't appear to be very knowledgeable. How can I trust him? That is really stereotyping, labeling. People are discriminating. Even the characters in the movie are discriminating against him. And they are excluding him. This is something that we oftentimes good experience, even with an impairment that is not necessarily obvious to other people, just because he is behaving differently than others around him. So, they are wrong. Because if you look, and that's what I love about this movie, it allows us to really see Baby for who he is, and not to see Baby because of his tinnitus. And it does a really beautiful job in making us understand that actually he's extremely skilled. Think about driving and being in a very difficult situations, having to do a very professional job of driving while you're blasting the music, dealing with your tinnitus, and being extremely successful at it. He is extremely skilled. He is also very aware of his surroundings, despite the fact that he has a lot of loud music playing at the same time. And think about it. You are listening to music, and in the meantime, you're getting some really difficult tasks and instructions. That's the word I was looking for some really difficult instructions. That's not easy. That's multitasking, and I'm not good at it, but maybe you are. Anyway, that shows that he is capable. He's way more intelligent than his comrades and his the other characters in the movie want us to believe. So, and he manages to have some beautiful relationships with some other characters in the movie. And so he also has that emotional intelligence there. So, as a person who rarely speaks and often appears not to be listening, the visuals and the narrative of the movie really show that we oftentimes are wrong about the assumptions that we have when we see someone else around us. That's the end of it. Thank you very much. Enjoy Baby Driver.
Thank you, Ilse. Did anyone have any questions for Ilse about our talk? Did anyone have any questions? I have yes, go ahead.
Well, I think people constantly are doing it. If you have tinnitus, you're trying to find a solution for it. Do we have solutions? We don't necessarily cannot really take the tinnitus away. So in that sense, there is no solution. But yes, we do try to come up with some alternative ways of getting your attention away from the tinnitus itself and suppressing it that way. Is that your question? Oh, well, that's what I just said. We don't have any fit-all prescription for tinnitus. It's a very difficult issue. We don't actually know 100% what it is. So that makes it hard. But there is more an idea of treating some of the other symptoms rather than the tinnitus itself. So, for example, if you have an attention problem because of that, try to work on the attention rather than on suppressing the tinnitus. Yes?
Just to repeat it in the microphone, the questioner is asking if this happens in a specific part of the brain and if there's a technological solution that could be on the way.
Right now, we don't really know that 100%. We don't know exactly what tinnitus is and where it comes from. It is thought to be indeed it is top down. So meaning that it comes from the brain. And one of the reasons why people think, for example, that speech perception is not really affected by the tinnitus is because when we perceive speech, it is an actual stimulus from the outside that hits our ears and what we call has a a bottom-up process, whereas if you have tinnitus, it's more coming from the brain and being processed lower, interfering with whatever is coming up. So I can't tell you that there is a real specific place where we can do something technologically, no. Yes.
Can you approach tinnitus solution with like hearing aids or other ways?
Yeah, in fact, some people do give hearing aids, but it's not to improve the hearing necessarily. Of course, you get hearing aids when you have a hearing loss, and the tinnitus goes hand in hand with that. But even when you don't have a hearing loss, you could have hearing aids that then can counter the focus on the tinnitus itself, yes, because you start opening up to other input that's coming to you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, go ahead. Questioner mentioned that there is people are using zinc to treat tinnitus. Is that a valuable solution?
Like I said to you, I'm not an audiologist. I come from the cognitive and the psychological part, so I really don't know about that. That's an interesting one. But if you want to know more about tinnitus, we do have a clinic at Montclair State University where people with all kinds of hearing impairments or listening issues come. And that would be the place to come and talk to some of the audiologists there.
This questioner is critiquing the sound at the Claridge by asking if movie theaters are too loud or if you feel that they're at the appropriate volume.
What is a diplomatic answer here? I don't know. It is loud. It is loud. Of course, but it's not necessarily a problem that you have loud noises once in a while, right? In a movie theater, you get those loud bursts of music, but then it can go it's not always very, very, very loud. It depends also on how long you are in loud environments. So it really, if you have loud sounds for a shorter period of time, extremely loud, then you might damage your ears more than if you are for a longer period of time in environments that are not as loud, but still kind of loud. So there are standards available. And actually what I saw, as you can tell, I have a little bit of an accent. I'm from Belgium originally. And not too long ago, I went to a concert in Belgium. And there they really did put the dB levels up to make people aware of when things are loud and how loud they are so that you can take precautions if you want to.
We have time for one more question. Yes. Is it a brain and an ear issue?
It's more of a brain issue than an ear issue because there's nothing there. Let me back it up. Your inner ear is involved in it up to a point, but it's not because there's a real stimulation from the outside. So if we're thinking about hearing loss, it is a stimulation from the outside that's really, the signal is not going through appropriately or loud enough so that you might not be able to process it fully. With tinnitus, there is no stimulation. Well, it's not damage. It's something that's going on in how the brain is processing things and firing in the neurons when there's nothing there.
Final question for me, because I had a question from your talk. You mentioned there's controversy in the literature about sort of the impact on cognitive recognition with tinnitus. You said there's, sometimes it might be that it's operating on the same frequency. There were other points on there. What is sort of the controversy? How does that play out in let's talk controversial science literature.
Wow, you make it very, very difficult. I was trying to steer away from that a little bit. Like with anything in science, there are different camps and different views. And you can have 10 studies that show you one thing, and then there come other studies that actually are disproving what the other 10 have shown. So one of the controversies here is, for a while, people have believed that, yes, tinnitus can affect speech perception. Now there have been studies that have shown that no, the tinnitus itself is not affecting your speech perception. It is not making you understand speech worse. It might be due to some other cognitive elements that are actually affecting the way you're listening. And so, for example, if you are not paying enough attention to what's being said because that tinnitus is nagging at you, that could then cause speech perception. If you are stressed and very anxious because of the tinnitus, that could cause a problem processing speech. And that's something that we really don't necessarily pay attention to enough, which is that speech perception is not always about how well you can hear. Speech perception can also be worse when you have psychological problems, when you have a high anxiety, when you are tense more than normal. That could also affect how well you can hear someone. And that has nothing to do with the ears. It's all with how the brain is processing the information that comes your way.
I want to thank you so much for your talk and for your time tonight.